What's going on, guys? Andrew of Newbar Gaming here, and today we're going to be talking about some Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains episode 70, and boy do we have a lot to jump into, and I am being dead serious when I say, so far on the show, this is probably my favorite episode. This show has revitalized a lot of my interest in it. It has reminded me that, okay, have a little faith in these writers, they probably are actually heading somewhere in the plot, but we'll get into all that in a little bit. I think the most logical place to start is probably in the simplest area, and that is that we had an awesome climax to this duel. The little bit of hints that we've been getting all over the place that synchro summoning is coming into Vrains were 100% confirmed. I mean, I had my suspicions, as you guys probably saw if you watched any of my discussions in regards to the episode previews and such, that maybe Konami was just toying with us a little bit, but no. Here we go. We were gifted exactly what we were looking for. Revolver synchro summons, bails himself out of this duel, creates an awesome new boss monster in Borreload Savage Dragon, and just schools Windy at the end of this. And it was just incredible watching him do that. I adored the new animation they were using for synchro summoning. I like the fact that they kept the little rings spinning and flipping to be vertical ways, kind of like a callback to 5Ds, and that they were keeping in mind, okay, yeah, this is still synchro, but they added a lot of the new virtual effects that go in with the new animation style to make it flow very well into Vrains, and I thought that was overall very well executed. And as a big fan of the card game myself, just seeing synchros back in action is awesome. I've never been the best at using them in dueling, but at the same time, I simply adore seeing them back in the card game. It was always one of the most interesting mechanics, and there was a lot more to it. You had to be able to foresee your combos a lot further ahead, but there was usually a really big payoff, and it shows a revival of the boss monster mentality in some ways for decks. A lot of the synchro decks back in the day would revolve around a single really good ace monster, such as, you know, shooting Quasar Dragon, OTKs, and those types of things. But anyway, diving back further into the episode, this episode started off with some amazing dialogue with some potentially equally amazing implications. Being, first off, Revolver knows who everybody involved in the Lost incident was, which, you know, it would probably have been fair to assume that all along, given how, you know, it was his father that ran the entire thing. But at the same time, he was a fairly young kid. We can assume we are told it occurred 10 years ago. Our Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonists are roughly 16 or 17, so 6 or 7, depending on how much they've aged throughout the duration of the show. So maybe he forgot, maybe he wasn't paying attention, maybe his father kept him away from the site. That's all what we could have theorized before, but now he do know for sure. He knows who each of the Ignis's partners are. So why is that relevant in this episode? Well, we find out from Windy that he had his partner outright killed. So that first off makes it a lot harder to synthesize with the side of the Ignises in this war. Before, I think you could definitely have made a case for, okay, they're being attacked by humans, they're kind of in the role of the defense, but it seems like they kind of have a totally anti-sympathetic view towards them to begin with. So with that being the case, I think it's hard to want to side with them, but at the same time, I can't say I totally agree with Revolver's side either. So back to the subject of Windy having killed his partner, we find out that it was he rigged a car to create a car accident. Now, what character's backstory that we know of so far that absolutely despises AI that lines up perfectly with that? Yep, you called it. A man by the name of Blood Shepherd, feared by Emma and respected by her at the same time, and also having nearly managed to defeat Playmaker and having a deck that it would make perfect sense for it to be wind attributed. So with that being the case, throw in the fact that we find out at the end that the light figure, or the figure with a glowing outline that has a shadowed in body, happens to also be Jin that Lightning's been commanding around, and we can more or less assume we know 5 of the Ignises and their corresponding humans. Lightning with Jin, Yusaku with Eye, Soulburner with Flame, Spectre with Earth, most likely at least, and then we've got Blood Shepherd with Windy, probably. Once more, can't necessarily justify that, but a lot seems to be hinting toward it. It seems to line up almost too perfectly, and that leaves Aqua, who I still think might be with Aoi. Her deck doesn't quite match it though, so I'm leaning slightly less towards that, since every other character's deck lines up perfectly. If he would have had at least one exception to the rule, I might have been a little more shaky on that. But regardless, that is a major bombshell for us, and that is the first major development we've had in terms of character linkage to Ignises in quite some time on the show. I mean, sure, there was Soulburner and Flame in the beginning of the season, and we got some implications between Earth and Spectre, but we didn't really see those two interact at all. Now we have an idea of how Windy's relationship with Blood Shepherd would have been. It gives me the impression that they probably didn't interact very much. Windy sort of abandoned his partner and also sought to kill him. So with that being the case, it was just a really interesting plot point to unfold upon, and it hints to me that we're going to be seeing a lot more of these types of things in terms of our other human Ignis relationships here pretty soon, which is very exciting. It's been one of the major plot attributes they've been hinting at in the show, but just never hitting. And when you build up all kinds of suspense like that, but never never actually give the release of the tension that it builds for us, it does get kind of frustrating after a while. So let's touch upon one of the other points. We find out Jin, whose consciousness was stolen, and who it was one of the major plot points of Season 1 and the primary motivation of Season 2 for our main characters to rescue him, is working with the Ignises. Now, this could mean any number of things, right? It could be that Lightning's manipulating him. He managed to get his consciousness data. We've already seen that the Ignises have vast and powerful control over any form of data within the the Cyber's world, and we can assume the Vrains world, given how they can summon data storms and those types of things. So it's very possible they stole his consciousness data, then they're manipulating his consciousness data to make it really difficult for someone like Playmaker and Kusanagi to fight back, who so far from everything we've seen is probably going to be their biggest roadblock. Sure, Revolver's strong, but if you throw Yusaku on top of that getting in their way, it's going to make things nearly impossible. Also factor in the fact that you've got main protagonist plot armor, but we can assume characters in the story aren't aware of that. That'd be a little too much fourth wall breaking. But my point there is, it's very much a case similar to what Merrick used to do in Duel Monsters, or it could be, where he will puppeteer one of the friends of our main character in order to make them hesitant to fight against him. So think back to the Yugi versus Joey duel, where Merrick was basically like, alright, I'm going to defeat you, Pharaoh, because if you defeat Joey, then you're going to end up costing him his life, and he knows that's something he won't do. Lightning could be setting it up so that Yusaku won't defeat him, because if he does, it will cost Jin his life and his consciousness, something Yusaku would never do, and same deal goes for Kusanagi, and most likely Soulburner as well, whereas you've got characters like Revolver, who's probably much less likely to care. Another theory on that topic is we find out that Jin was very shattered after the events of the Lost Incident, right? It's very possible that maybe he decided he had given up on humanity himself after that. He saw the horrible things that someone like Dr. Kogami could put him through in the name of an experiment, and as a result, he was basically left in this isolated and shattered state with only one person to turn to, and that was his partner Ignis. So with that being the case, only one person who sort of connected to him from that incident, and that was his partner Ignis throughout those years. I mean, sure, they didn't interact at the time, but it was created based off of him. And I would say it's probably fair to assume the Ignises have some understanding of what happened to their human partners. So with that being the case, perhaps Lightning reached out to him, and then from there they formed some sort of a bond, and they both kind of bonded over, hey, I'm an Ignis, I don't need humanity to survive, and I know that they're after me to destroy me. You're a human. They did all these horrible things to you, and humanity's capable of those terrible things. Why don't we work together, since we seem to have a mutual enemy here? Very twisted, and I would be kind of surprised if that was the route they went with Jin, but I mean, we've certainly seen them take some similar character arcs to that in the past, where one event twists a human against everybody else. Look at all the minions that, Darts managed to use against Yugi and company in Season 4 of Duel Monsters. They basically gave up on humanity and were willing to watch it burn because they watched themselves get shattered by the misactions of it. And that's essentially what happened to Jin here. He was basically tortured for a year with dueling and everything else. And then I'm sure there's any number of theories. If you guys have more theories in regards to Jin, be sure to let me know in the comments section and down below, but those are the main two that stick out to me right now. Is either A, he's a puppet, or B, he's siding with the Ignis out of choice because he just hates humanity and has given up on it to some extent at this point. Now, if that does turn out to be the case, where he is fighting with them by choice, I think it could be a very, very interesting character dynamic to watch that unfold when he eventually, we can assume he'll probably at some point speak to Kusanagi about this, the kind of dialogue that we'll see unravel there between those two. You know, will Kusanagi be able to get through to Jin, and then maybe at that point Jin then switches back to my original theory and becomes a puppet because Lightning no longer sees him fighting for him by will. He'll just take over him at that point, or something along those lines. Regardless, that's going to be a really interesting relationship to watch. Now, speaking of which, right around that reveal, we also got it 100% confirmed to us that Bowman is working right alongside the Ignises. And that implies to me that Bowman, I'm much more confident in the theory that he is fighting alongside the Ignises by choice. My only issue with that is Bowman could also just be an avatar created by the Ignises, and I suppose this is also possible with Jin as well. Going along with that, let's start with Bowman for that, because that's a little bit of a major theory that I got to justify a little bit there. Bowman we've never actually seen outside of Link Vrains. Now, that of course doesn't confirm that he doesn't exist outside of Link Vrains. It took us, 40 some episodes to finally see Revolver outside of Link Vrains, and we knew he was real. So Bowman we've never seen outside of Link Vrains, but given how we don't know a lot about his character either, or what his motivations may be, or anything along those lines, it's very possible possible he's just a form of an avatar created by the Ignises, but I find that somewhat unlikely once more. What I am more confident in is he's fighting alongside those Ignises by choice. I'm wondering if he was a human at one point that got destroyed and then managed to somehow like revive himself as Data, and then whatever destroyed him as a human, or killed him I should say, caused him to lose faith in humanity, and now he's working alongside the Ignises to create what he may consider like a better successor to humanity or something along those lines. Or maybe he was like one of the workers, or somehow tied to one of the workers who was with Dr. Kogami, who was an absolute, advocate for the creation of the Ignis program during the Lost incident, and maybe now he's fighting to carry on that legacy, because a lot of times in Yu-Gi-Oh! We do see this parent lineage type of thing either haunt a character or inspire them, such as what we saw with Revolver. It inspired him, versus what we saw with Merrick, where his lineage basically destroyed him as a person, the fact that he was stuck being a tomb keeper the rest of his life, and saw himself given to the dark side that would eventually spawn his entire character arc. So it's very possible Bowman's undergoing something like that. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, as for the thing of Jin, I do want to say it is still possible, given the vast control that the AIs do have within Link Vrains, that they just created some piece of data that looks a lot like Jin in order to be able to get to Yusaku and Kusanagi, who other than Revolver are going to be the biggest barrier in their way right now. Now granted, Yusaku and Kusanagi aren't necessarily directly opposed to them, they're more so just trying to get them to listen to reason and peace, but at the same time, if they do aim to achieve their objective, which is destroying humanity, they will have to fight Yusaku at some point, which is going to be a pretty major hurdle. So if they're managed to trick him into believing that if he hurts them, then he'll end up hurting Jin. Typical villain move that can really hit hard at a lot of heroes. Yusaku, despite how edgy he is, we do know that he has a heart underneath all of that. So now we're kind of left with a lot of questions after this episode, but it successfully also answered a lot of questions. I think that was one of the reasons I enjoyed the episode so much, is I believe a good episode of a show like this manages to answer some of your questions about a plot, but they expand in such a way that they manage to leave you wanting more because they open up new questions. So it doesn't just leave you dangling on the same question the entire time, and I know I've used the word question a lot. Some of those questions that come to mind for me are, first off, how are we going to watch this whole partner thing unfold with the AIs? We already saw that I instinctively reacted calling to try to help Windy when Windy was being destroyed by the Knights of Hanoi. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything because the side that both Yusaku and I are on is the side of trying to create peace, so I don't think it necessarily means that I is going to have to turn against Yusaku, but I think it's going to put him in a weird place in that, yes, both of them are neutral, but if we're looking at more of a spectrum of the sides, we have to assume that Yusaku will most likely slightly lean with the Knights of Hanoi because he is a human, therefore it's his instinct to kind of protect his own, and I, being an I, while once more he is AI, it's once more being in the middle of that spectrum of both sides of the war, is kind of going to be leaning slightly towards the right, because it's going to be his instinct to protect his AI compatriots. So with that being the case, they're going to both be more working together than they are for either of the other two situations, but I think there could be some light clashing between the two of them, and the same goes for Flame and Soulburner respectively, and I'm just going to be curious to see where we go with the rest of these partners now that we're starting to understand some of their identities. I'm really curious to see what the relationship between Jin and Lightning is. Where is that unfolding? Is it a puppet thing? Is it a cooperative thing? And why is Jin there to begin with? And also, when did they start to communicate with each other? We don't know a lot about Jin yet, and I think this really busted open the gate for us to learn some more about what happened to him, who he is, where his mind has been all this time, because he was basically described as being the shattered shell of a person after the Lost incident, so I'm sure something was going through his head. Then we've also got all the other Ignises and partners, including Spectre. How's he going to eventually interact when he meets up with Earth? Is it possible that we'll end up seeing Spectre, have a little switch of the tables? Maybe Earth will convince him that, peace is a good thing. Maybe he'll encounter Earth. He'll have good memories to the Lost incident because he did like that, and in his own twisted little way feel some attachment to Earth again. But as much as I do hold out hope for something like that, because I do like Spectre's character and I would like to see him grow in some ways, at the same time, the fact that he spent decent, basically all of his screen time in this episode trying to get Soulburner to come to the same side of the Knights of Hanoi, likely because they've probably somewhat given up on swaying Playmaker in their own way, and they figure, hey, Soulburner's a really good duelist too, why don't we go ahead and pick him up and get him to help us in this fight? Plus he's got Flame, so we can go and eliminate Flame in the process. But regardless, since Spectre spent most of his time trying to get Soulburner to switch to the sides of the Knights of Hanoi, doubt he's going to end up switching there, but I would still really like to see that interaction between the Earth Ignis and him. And then on top of that, we've also got the fact that we know who Windy's partner was. I wonder how we're going to see him react when he finds out that Windy's really injured. Is he going to be trying to kill him him. I mean, we did see Blood Shepherd appear in the episode 71 preview at the end of this episode, and it looks to me like he's going through some intense action sequences. My bet is, yeah, he's trying to finish off Windy. Now, maybe, just maybe, something causes a change of heart in there. Maybe we find out some new plot details, but once more, I kind of doubt it. So we've already got two humans who we can assume have probably given up on their partners, being Spectre and Blood Shepherd respectively. I think that's going to put the AIs once more back in that strange spot where, yeah, you know, Flame and I, and potentially Earth and Aqua, we don't know where they fall yet, are leaning towards trying to make peace with the humans, but they've seen a lot of negative things, a lot of severed bonds, and you can't help, if you're in their situation, but question, how long will my bond with my, you know, partner last? Is it something that is indefinite, or will we eventually go our separate ways and watch a violent conclusion, such as Spectre hunting the AIs, despite the fact that one's his partner, Blood Shepherd most likely being willing to outright destroy Windy, etc., etc. And it just bothers me so much, or not bothers me, but it leaves me so curious as to who Aqua's partner is going to end up being. So with all that being said, guys, hopefully you can see why I enjoyed this episode so much. We got synchro summoning, we got a ton of new plot information regarding people tied to the Ignises, and we've got a pretty decent idea of where the plot's going in some ways, and it seems to me after this episode that it's fair to assume these writers have been planting little seeds all over the place all the time, and people who are making really long videos like me speculating about things aren't wasting their time at all, because there are strings of these plots that are going to end up linking together. So with all that being said, be sure to let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. If not, constructive criticism is always welcome, and I'll catch you guys next time with some more Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains content.